The religious really love to whine, and this is going to showcase that, but hey, it's better than nothing, right? Because that's really all they have. If they stopped complaining about what victims they were, they'd have nothing to say at all, and I'd be perfectly fine with that. How about you? So here we go again, because it just doesn't get any better, does it? We're off to Red Pen Logic with Tim Barnett complaining that atheists are just strawmanning Christianity. Except we're not, and I think this is going to backfire on him, as it always does. Because, let's be honest, Tim is just not that bright. A lesson that we've learned through dozens of videos of him making himself look really bad. Not that it's a surprise or anything, because all theists, all apologists, all theologians, they're all doing it, right? Where are the theists with a brain? Because it would sure be nice if we could find one. Instead, we get people like Tim. So let's suffer through it, okay?
Hey Christians, I have a question. Have you ever heard someone attack Christianity and thought, that's not what we actually believe?
Probably not as often as Christians strawman atheism and do the exact same thing, because that is constant. But here's the problem. There are more than 45,000 distinct sects of Christianity. Each one believes something completely different. So, of course, anything that an atheist says, some Christians, in fact, probably most Christians, are probably going to quibble with that statement. Too bad. The proper response would be, hey, I don't believe that. Here's what I do believe. And then let the conversation continue. But instead, Tim is going to just whine to his almost entirely Christian audience instead of addressing the problem with actual atheists. Because Tim doesn't want to talk to atheists, does he? Atheists don't pay him, and he knows which side his bread is buttered on. This could easily be solved by simply speaking up and correcting the misconception. Sadly, that doesn't really work with Christians, does it? How many times have you told them that we don't believe everything came from nothing? Did it help? I bet it didn't. How many times have you told a Christian that you don't believe in their God, only to have them argue with you and tell you that their book says you really do? Because the religious are kind of assholes like that a lot of the time. So don't be a hypocrite, Tim. Although, I guess we all know that's really what you're going to do.
Well, congratulations. You've likely spotted a straw man fallacy.
You should know all about those, Tim, because you're full of them. Or at least you're full of something. There's got to be a top 10 list of those rolling around out there somewhere that the religious can't get it through their heads that they're wrong. Because as we all know, they just don't care. I have lost track of how many times I've had Christians tell me, in no uncertain terms, that I believe things that I don't, even though I have directly spelled it out to them in great detail, because they can't be wrong, and everybody else just has to be like they are. They are full of straw men. It's Rule 1 in the Apologetics playbook. You know your opposition better than they know themselves. Tell them what they think, because you're always right. This is why they don't want to talk to us, because it's a whole lot easier to misrepresent us when we're not around, right? There is no honest discourse going on with the religious, as if that's any surprise. But sure, go right ahead, Tim. Complain. Whine. Pretend you have the slightest clue what you're doing, because it's really all you're good at.
That's when someone distorts or weakens a view so it can be easily defeated.
No, that's not quite what a straw man is. It is assigning a view to another person that they do not actually hold so that you can attack that imaginary view without having to address the actual truth. And as I said, you can simply object and correct the misconception, and if your opponent is an honest interlocutor, then they will accept that correction. And if they're not, then you've got no reason to be holding the conversation in the first place. That person just isn't worth it. Because here's the problem. We have more than 45,000 distinct positions that you could possibly hold, and there are far fewer for that for atheists. Actually, there's only one, because nothing else is actually atheism. The only really worthwhile tactic is to ask specific questions, but the religious tend to avoid providing credible answers. If they actually answer the question being asked, instead of using it as a springboard into making more unjustifiable claims, then they just open themselves up to attack, and they don't want to do that, do they? It's why most religious conversations become annoyingly vague on the religious side, because they keep trying to hide their actual views. We've seen this a million times before. Most Christians wouldn't know honesty if it bit them in the ass. Big surprise there.
Before you can refute an idea, you actually have to understand the idea. Otherwise, you're not defeating the actual view, you're defeating an imitation of the view.
Yeah, and atheists believe that everything came from nothing. Except we don't. And all atheists are nihilists. Except we're not. And all atheists, they just want to sin. Except sin is a made-up concept that we do not accept. Yada, yada, yada. Because we see this all the time, don't we? Now, I'm not blaming Christianity as a whole. It's the fault of individual Christians. But he's trying to blame atheists as a whole instead of citing specific examples. Because, Tim is just an asshole. This is going to be another video of good for me, but not for thee, isn't it? Before you start complaining about us, how about you pry that log out of your own eye? Because we've seen Tim saying all these things in his videos before, and he's never going to be honest about it, is he? Why? Because it gets him respect from the Christian community, because that's really all he's after. That and money. Truth is not remotely part of his playbook. Wonder why?
Sounds obvious, right? But here's the problem. Understanding those who disagree with us takes work. It's easier to misrepresent those we disagree with. Christians face this fallacy all the time online.
Aw, poor baby. This is a ridiculously easy problem to solve. You stop, you make a correction. If the other person doesn't accept your correction, you just walk away. It's easy. I don't debate dishonest pricks, and you probably shouldn't either. There is no reason to waste your time on someone who isn't listening to you. They're not even talking to you. They're debating some imaginary figure in their heads. Okay, cool. Let them go talk to themselves because you've probably got something better to do. I'm not saying that there aren't some atheist jerks out there, because there absolutely are, but that number is dwarfed by the number of Christian assholes that I run into on a daily basis. If you can't convince somebody that you're right without lying to them, without lying about them, then you've got some serious problems, don't you?
People attack a distorted view of Christianity, then pat themselves on the back like they refuted the real thing.
And what is the real thing? Because like I said, 45,000 distinct sects. Apparently, nobody knows what the real thing is, nor do they care. Because I can talk to all of them, at least hypothetically, and get entirely different, often contradictory answers, and each and every one of them are supremely convinced that they've got the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And everybody else is wrong. So which one of them actually does? Because they can't all be right, but they certainly can all be wrong, can't they? This is why you need evidence, not, it sounds good to me, which is really all any religion is running on. It's dogma over data, which is doing intelligence exactly ass backwards. How can you claim to be doing it right if you can't justify your beliefs in any defensible way? Oh, right, you can't. But that doesn't stop them from trying, does it?
Let me give you a few examples that have come my way. One person tweeted, definition of faith, pretending to know things you don't know.
Which is absolutely accurate. Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. It's in your own stupid book. So, what is knowledge? It is defined as an awareness of facts, a familiarity with individuals and situations. Those two definitions do not go together, sorry. That's why you have to rely on faith, which is just wishful thinking and shit that you really, really like. Your own Bible says so. In fact, I just looked up the difference between faith and knowledge, and I got knowledge is information gained through experience, learning, or study, while faith is belief in something without requiring proof. And that's exactly what you were told. It's believing what you do not know. You just really like the sound of it. And that's stupid.
Another says the primary belief of Christianity is child sacrifice.
I'm not going to go with that one because it's completely indefensible. And it is the defensibility that matters, right? If someone had said that to me at another point in my life, I would have asked what they meant. Granted, he's getting upset at things someone sends him online, which I guess is kind of childish anyhow, right? This is why you need to have intelligent conversations, not just throw stupid sound bites back and forth, and that tends to be all we see these days, isn't it? In fact, this is kind of an ongoing thing at the moment, but a Christian showed up in an atheist subreddit and started complaining that atheists were being mean by attacking Christians on their own turf and that they should just leave them alone. Said while doing exactly what he's criticizing in an atheist subreddit. He's trying to play the victim while victimizing others because of course he is. Now, I don't blame all Christians for that, but I do see it all the time, don't you? If you want to sit in your echo chamber and theologically masturbate, feel free. I don't care. I am not going to come and bother you. I never go to any religious subreddits at all. But if you come here, if you come to where we are, you are going to get your ass kicked because you've got nothing worthwhile to say. You cannot justify your beliefs. And that's your problem, not ours.
Another thinks he's representing a Christian argument when he says everything has a creator, God is that creator, God does not have a creator.
So, the original cosmological argument. You know, the one that made you look stupid, so you invented another version where it's now everything that begins to exist. And you can't prove that your imaginary friend didn't begin to exist or exists at all, so you still don't have a coherent thing to say. And it isn't like this is a dead argument because it still pops up in religious channels from time to time. I seem to remember Daniel King trying that one out and getting his ass handed to him because it just doesn't work. Granted, the Kalam doesn't work either, and it doesn't even address the existence of any gods, but that's another thing entirely. None of this stuff works, and you people do it to yourself by having these really stupid arguments. Don't pretend you don't.
For each criticism, we should ask, what is the belief being represented? And if the belief is being misrepresented, then we have a straw man.
Then feel free to correct it. Granted, I guess you can't really correct drive-by insults, and it's pretty foolish to try. Those you just ignore. Otherwise, you're playing an endless game of whack-a-mole with people who aren't even paying attention. This is, again, a problem with the religious who try this constantly. It's just drive-by preaching with no intention whatsoever in having a rational conversation or in even addressing disagreements. For some reason, some people think that it's an effective use of their time. I don't, which is why I generally don't do it, because, it's stupid. I don't even comment on the videos that I do around here because I know that they're not going to respond. These videos are my response, and if they come here and they want to start a conversation, I will absolutely engage. I always engage with everyone. There are very, very few cases where they show up and do more than a hit and run, though, never to be seen again. But that's a failure with their side, not mine.
Take the first one. Faith isn't pretending to know things you don't know. It's not a way of knowing at all. It's a way of trusting.
Trusting what? What have you demonstrated actually deserves your trust, or is even real in the first place? Because that part is kind of important. it sounds good to me is not trustworthy just because you really like the idea. You do not know that these things are true because knowledge requires some demonstrable basis in fact, not it seems to me. It's a fair criticism because you can provide no evidence for any of the things that you take on faith, and facts, whether you like it or not, are demonstrable to others. If you can't show me that your beliefs are true or likely to be true based on verifiable facts, then you're just being an idiot. Because we have the definition of faith from your own book. It is the only place in the book that specifically defines what faith is. Nowhere do you have anything that you can specifically point to that you can show is worthy of anyone's trust. You just really like the idea, and that's stupid.
Faith is trusting what you have good reason to believe is true.
Such as, you've just made a claim. What is it that you've got good reason to believe is true? Be specific and have evidence to back it up. Because we all know that he can't. Ultimately, faith is just circular. He believes in a God on faith because there's no evidence for any of it at all. Then, because he already believes in a God, he believes a bunch of other stories equally without corroboratory evidence, and it goes around and around and around and around. What is it that you're actually trusting that you have any good evidence to support? Nothing. Nothing at all. It starts with faith and it ends with faith, with only faith in the middle. It's a gigantic nothing burger. What else is new?
Second, the primary belief of Christianity isn't child sacrifice. Jesus, God the Son, willingly lays down his life as an adult.
And I already agreed that this is silly. I don't even know where to start on this one, so I'm not really going to bother. Granted, this is just random drive-by nonsense, and that's not worth discussing at all. If there's no larger context or debate going on, then don't you have better things to do with your life? No, because he's just looking for something to complain about so that he can make a video, and this was the best that he could come up with at the time. One that is absolutely true, and one that nobody but the original author even understands what they were trying to get at. We'll do the last one in a second, I'm sure. But these were the best three that he could come up with? Seriously? What an idiot.
Calling that child sacrifice misrepresents what we believe. And finally, Christians don't argue that everything has a creator.
Absolutely they do, or at least some of them. The cosmological argument is a Christian creation, and it gets trotted out all the time. I bet I could find a ton of lists of Christian arguments right now that includes the original cosmological argument. So you're just wrong. Yes, in some circles it has been supplanted by the Kalam, which was only invented because it became obvious that the original cosmological argument had problems, but really the Kalam is no better. Now, Tim might not like the original, and that's fine, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't a Christian argument, and that Christians today don't still use it, so the tweet, or whatever it was, is still accurate. It just might not fit Tim's specific theology, but as I said, 45,000 and then some distinct sects, and you see the problem. So Tim is still an idiot. He's just lying to his followers because the actual truth is demonstrable.
We argue that everything that begins to exist has a creator. So the first premise is misstated to make the argument easier to defeat.
Not really, because the one that Tim just said is just a bald assertion, not backed up by any verifiable data. You don't just get to arbitrarily claim that your imaginary friend had no beginning as a way to get out of the problem. That's just special pleading and a laughable example of it to boot. Because you can't prove that your God didn't begin to exist. You can't prove that your God exists at all. This is the problem with trying to define things into existence. It doesn't work. You can't show that the definition that you've arbitrarily assigned to your God is actually true. You have to be able to do that. And this goes right back to the faith debacle from before. Just because you have faith that your God is whatever you wish that it was, That doesn't mean that it is. You need data to back that up, and you don't have any. That is why faith fails, because it's idiotic.
Each of these challenges purports to know something about Christianity, yet each provides a textbook example of a straw man.
No, not really. I mean, the first was true, the second was, well, who the hell knows, and the third likewise was true. You just don't like it. This is just Tim whining, this makes the shit that I believe look bad. Yeah? Yeah, it does, because it is. I can't speak for his second example because I've got no idea what it was getting at, but the others, yeah, absolutely, it makes Christian beliefs look terrible. Because they are. They're not straw men. In fact, if anything, Tim is engaging in the straw man by denying that these are perfectly valid criticisms of Christianity. Now, they might not describe what Tim personally believes, and that's where you have a conversation. But nowhere in any of them does it say, Tim Barnett believes this. It's just a general statement, true in 2 out of 3 instances, and we don't really know about the third because we don't even know what's going on. And Tim just doesn't happen to like it, but who gives a shit what Tim thinks? So he just whines so he can make more content, so he can get paid, and the algorithm will smile on him. Because that's what this is really all about. And I don't think he really cares.
The best way to respond to a straw man is to call it out and correct it.
And did you do that? I mean, who knows, maybe he did, but he still has video to go, and mostly this is just grist for his content mill, and he wouldn't actually respond to the posters at the time. Now, I'm perfectly willing to be proven wrong, and like I said, he still has time to do that, but mostly I don't see the religious actually responding, especially intelligently, to criticisms of their beliefs. That's why you get the from a Christian perspective crap so often. Because they figure that so long as they believe it, it's just got to be true. But that's not how one demonstrates truth, is it? That's how one maintains an uncritical belief system, and that's just dumb. Not that they care or anything, they just desperately want to believe.
Say something like, that's not our view. You've presented a distorted version. What we actually believe is... Then give a clear and honest explanation. That's how you move forward towards a productive conversation.
And did Tim do that? I doubt it. He didn't present any screenshots of that response to any of them, which is why I figure he's just yanking these general purpose comments off of Twitter or whatever and pretending that they were sent directly to him. If they were, he's presented no evidence for it, but this is Tim, and evidence is not exactly something that he's likely to provide for anything. It's why it all just looks like a scam, because it is one. He just picks this stuff out of a hat, pretends that it happened to him, and suddenly he's off to the races. Tim is not an honest interlocutor because I don't know that he ever engages rationally with anyone directly at all. It's just grist for the mill so he can just keep his audience happy and entertained and hopefully giving him money. And that's kind of stupid, isn't it?
By the way, Christians aren't immune to misrepresenting others.
No shit. No shit.
No shit.
No shit!
No shit.
No shit.
Yeah, no shit.
No shit.
Oh shit.
No shit.
Yeah, no shit.
No shit.
No shit. No shit.
No shit.
No shit.
No shit. No shit.
No shit.
No shit.
No shit.
No shit.
No shit.
We can commit the same fallacy too. That's why we train red pen thinkers to be constantly asking questions, seeking clarity, and following the principle of charity.
So why do you do it to yourself so often? We catch him in these things all the time, right? Oh yes, it's do as I say, not as I do, as a defense mechanism, because of course Christians are going to do it. They don't actually know or care what Muslims or atheists or anybody else really thinks, because they are intentionally ignorant. They spend their time in their own little comforting bubbles, and they don't care what's going on outside. That's one reason that I respond to an entire video. I don't just pull out snippets because I don't want anyone to accuse me of taking things out of context. The context is right there. Look at it. I also provide a link to the original video so you can go back and see what they said. They said it exactly as I responded to it. If they said it badly, hey, that's not my problem, that's theirs. But I am giving them the most charitable opportunity that I can to make their case, and not one of them has ever made a good one. And that's especially true of Tim. So go on about your excuses, dude. You are not impressing anyone with a brain.
We want to represent other people's views as strongly and as fairly as possible.
Bullshit. Because you just proved that you didn't with 2 out of your 3 examples. If you wanted to do that, you could have done more than say, nuh-uh. Because as I showed, both were perfectly valid statements that apply to actual Christian beliefs. If it doesn't apply to you, then just say so. Because here's something else that I have to point out, and this goes for all sides, but everything isn't all about you. If someone says something generally, meaning it's not specifically aimed at you, then it's not a personal insult. That you take it that way, that's your problem, not theirs. Maybe you need to grow up, because that would sure be nice, wouldn't it?
We don't want to beat up straw men. We want to challenge steel men, the strongest version of the opposing view.
No, you don't. You just proved that you don't. If you did, then you would have acknowledged the truth between 2 of those 3 statements, which were absolutely accurate to at least some Christian views. That it doesn't apply to you, so what? You are the one that tried to pretend that it did. If it doesn't apply to you, then you either respond and say so, which I feel confident that Tim didn't do, or you just move on, which Tim refused to do because he's only after views and support. He's the one insisting on making this all about him, because Tim is an asshole, and I trust no one is surprised.
Because ultimately, a red pen thinker cares more about truth than winning an argument.
Clearly not. Did you even engage with those people? I bet you didn't. So you don't care about the truth, you care about winning brownie points with your followers. That is not truth. I don't think you would know truth if it bit you in the ass. Because you don't care. That's why you wanted to quibble over nonsense for things that were demonstrably so, because they hurt your precious little fifis. That's how the religious operate. If he had gone after those posters, they would have handed him his ass, and Tim wouldn't like that, would he? Tim just wants to feel special, even though he's laughably not, because Tim is a moron, and this is just more proof of that.
All right, here's your homework. Can you think of a time when Christianity was misrepresented? And be honest, can you think of a time when Christians misrepresented someone else's view? Tell me about it in the comments. Class dismissed.
Yes, and I've already done that. So we're not going to do it again. This was really painful, but I guess we shouldn't be surprised because this is Tim Barnett we're talking about. He and Mike Winger are both laughable jokes without an intelligent thing to say. Granted, no apologist out there has anything intelligent to say. Maybe these two just feel worse because we do a fair bit of them. I really wish there was some basic quality out there somewhere, but there really doesn't seem to be among the religious. They're all terrible and ridiculous, and that's kind of a problem for Christianity, isn't it? Not that any other religion has anything better, because they're all garbage, aren't they? Islam is garbage, Hinduism is garbage, you name it, if it's a religion, it's crap. So we wind up doing a lot of crap around here because we don't really have any choice, do we? You'd think the religious would figure it out after a while and maybe insist on something better, but they don't. And that's kind of a problem, wouldn't you say? At least you'd think so. So what do you think about any of this? Did Tim make as much of a fool of himself as he usually does? Or maybe more, I don't know. Let me know down in the comments. I'm really down to one apologist that I generally like, and I can't only do his videos, although there are more on the way, I promise. Why can't we find any theist with a brain? Let me know what you think on that too, and I'll catch you all next time.